So Kehkashan Basu is a youth leader, a global influencer, an environmentalist, champion of women and children's rights, a National Geographic Young Explorer, a climate reality mentor, author, musician, peace and sustainability campaigner. So she's the founder and president of the Global Social Innovative Enterprise Green Hope Foundation. So working at a grassroots level in 25 countries, empowering young people, especially those from vulnerable communities, in the sustainable development process. So she was also the winner of the 2016 International Children's Peace Prize Award. So let's bring her in. And Canada, I've got another Canadian joining me. There we go. That's the first today.
Awesome. But great to be here today as a fellow Canadian.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thrilled to have you joining us. Obviously, you're doing incredible work, and it's great to see that it's being recognized. So I'm going to let you take over for a little bit, and we'd love to dive into your world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. And hello. Wonderful to be here with all of you today and to speak to you on a very important topic that is very close to my heart. So let me just begin by sharing my screen. Great. So I will be talking to you today about how we can drive change at the grassroots and protect our mangrove ecosystems. Now, I'll start by taking you all back to my first kayaking experience, which really turned out to be an eye-opener. This was about 10 years ago in 2011. I was 11 years old and was at a beach conducting a cleanup with some friends on a hot summer afternoon. And from the shoreline, we could see a stretch of greenery some distance away that looked really alluring, as it seemed to literally be floating on the tide. Now, the beach had some kayaks on hire, and after our cleanup, we decided to try our hands at kayaking out to the nearby green island that looked really pristine and untouched. But what greeted our eyes as we kayaked into them was completely shocking, because the green island was an offshore belt of mangroves. And as we neared them, we saw plastics of all colors and hues that were sticking out of the water. And when we looked closer, we saw that they were covering the roots of the now shriveled mangroves. And as we navigated deeper into the greenery and the vegetation there, we found carcasses of fish, crabs, turtles, and even what appeared to be a fox. We saw seagulls that were pecking at brightly colored floating plastic bags, possibly mistaking them for fish. There were tin cans, rubber tires, cast iron pipes. It was literally as if we were in a landfill. The only difference that it was offshore and hidden from the eyes of all of the beachgoers who had absolutely no inkling that their litter was finding a resting place in this verdant stretch of greenery and killing it, along with all of the other life forms that resided in it. So we parked our kayaks and we started our cleanup all over again. It took us 3 days and multiple trips to clean that small stretch of mangroves, collecting an amount of litter that honestly we hadn't gathered from any of our other beach cleanups. We thought that it would stay clean, but when we returned after a couple of months, it was a repeat situation. And that was what made us realize that we had to address the problem of littering at its source. On the beaches, along the coastline, we had to stop people from throwing their trash indiscriminately and above all, reducing their plastic usage. Now, that was back in 2011, and thus began our journey to save one of our planet's most fragile ecosystem, one that plays such a vital role and yet is so unacknowledged and hidden from public consciousness, and that is, of course, our mangroves. And it is this lack of awareness and the overbearing sense of apathy towards mangroves that we at Green Hope Foundation have been working to rectify since then. Our first step after that kayaking trip that turned into a cleanup was to create a toolkit. We documented all of the types of trash that we found. We made a slideshow of the images, and some of them were pretty gruesome, of the dead animals. And we began conducting workshops and conferences in schools. That was the birth of our unique advocacy concept, Sustainability Academy, where our children and youth members, some as young as 6 years old, were trained to educate their peers in school or in their community about why mangroves are so important. And we were completely taken aback by the knowledge gap that existed, not just amongst the children, but more worryingly amongst the adults, be it their educators or parents. The common response was that mangroves did not appear alluring in the way that other coastal ecosystems such as coral reefs do. So people really didn't care about their existence. They were just looked upon as shrubland that was better off giving way to development and construction. We started using art as a medium of communication and education in our academies to make it easier for the children to understand. And this really complemented our video toolkits that we made for rural communities where there were no schools. So for adults and young people alike, we explained how mangrove forests are coastal plant communities that are part of a larger coastal ecosystem that typically includes mudflats, seagrass meadows, tidal marshes, salt barrens, and even coastal upland forests and freshwater wetlands and peatlands, freshwater streams and rivers. In more tropical climate, coral reefs may also be part of this ecosystem, and we showed images of these that we had encountered during our projects worldwide. And through our art workshops, we explained how they are a critical habitat for many species of fish and wildlife, serving as coastal fish and shellfish nursery habitats and producing large quantities of leaf materials that becomes the basis for a detritus food web. And in many of our workshops, children were encouraged to find out and then draw all of the types of biodiversity and wildlife species that habituated the mangroves. And everyone was incredulous when the drawings filled up the entire hallway at the amazing diversity of life that inhabited some of these mangroves. And it was as if we were removing a curtain and making them see what lay beyond it. And they were unaware that once established, mangroves can serve as coastal protection from hurricanes and typhoons, and that riverine mangroves help remove pollutants before they enter adjacent coastal waters. And there exists enough documented research that proves these ecological functions, but sadly, over time, mangrove forests have been dredged and filled for decades to provide other coastal uses like ports and housing. Now, according to published data, it's estimated that there are 180,000 square kilometers of mangrove forests in the world, and major historical losses have occurred over the last century. Anecdotal estimates are that up to 50% of all mangroves that historically existed may have been lost to date, and that current rates of loss may be as high as 1% per year. And we've seen firsthand the extent of this loss when we started working with the coastal communities in the Sundarbans, the world's largest mangrove forest that spans a large part of eastern India and Bangladesh. Now, the Sundarbans straddles the border between these two countries, and it has witnessed significant degradation due to a combination of pollution, urbanization, erosion, and human encroachment. And the entire area remains starkly underdeveloped, and with the men from these rural coastal communities migrating to cities and towns for work, and the cities themselves coming into the mangroves for urbanization. So the erosion of these mangroves have left these villages exposed to tropical storms, two of which, Cyclone Isla and recently Cyclone Amphan, caused tremendous devastation and loss of life. This is a classical cause of how climate change impacts vulnerable communities more, and thus our work becomes a part of the climate justice movement, and moreover, the feminist climate justice movement, wherein we address climate change and biodiversity issues through the lens of human and gender impacts. So for the past 5 years, we've been working in this region in both countries. Our advocacy programs have been focused on not just prevention, but also restoration. And through our sustainability academies, we've created an ambassador program where we train the young children to organize regular cleanups in their villages, go door to door to teach the adults on avoiding plastic usage, to stop littering and segregate their trash that previously used to be dumped on the tidal channels, thereby blocking them or getting entangled in the mangrove roots and in turn killing the mangroves. And these ambassadors now regularly dredge the channels to ensure smooth flow of seawater amongst the plants. And to alleviate the devastation caused by the typhoons, we organized relief campaigns ensuring that they had clean clothes and dry food. We are now working on the regeneration of these ecosystems by planting new saplings. And in just the last couple of years, our efforts have resulted in the reforestation of an entire island. And our teams are similarly working on mangrove regeneration programs in other parts of the world. In Suriname, which has the envious record of being the most forested country in the world with 93% forest cover, we have partnered with their National Youth Parliament with the objective of developing youth environmental stewardship programs that will encourage the young people of the country to become responsible protectors of their nature. And surprisingly, even in this large green country, we found significant degradation of the mangroves. And again, it was a lack of awareness about the importance and a misconceived notion that they didn't need protection and could self-regenerate. And that led to their degradation. So our local chapter has now made significant progress through a combination of reducing pollution and restoration through replanting. The threats to mangroves come in quite unique forms as well, depending on their location. While working with local teams in our chapter in the Bahamas, the major threat comes from tourism and the extensive waste that cruise liners leave behind. We collected trash with labels in 20 different languages during one of the cleanup of the mangroves in one of the islands. And it's this lack of empathy that is really destroying our ecosystems. Legislation by itself has proved to be ineffective. The long-term solution is through creating awareness. And at Green Hope Foundation, we believe that education for sustainable development is the most potent mantra. It may not yield immediate results since we're working with wicked problems, but in the long term, it will create a more responsible society, one that understands the importance of natural balance in lives and consumes with care. And this approach must address the unique needs to local coastal communities, especially if these are in rural settings. One must work to reestablish traditional livelihoods because these were essentially symbiotic with their natural environment. And here we have to talk about why indigenous and traditional knowledge is also so important when we are addressing the topic of mangrove conservation. And in the urban context, it needs to be a combination of involving all stakeholders in the overall sustainability planning roadmap and ensuring that mangroves play a very important part of this roadmap while educating all sections of civil society, incorporating it into the formal education curriculum and tracking progress. And our success will depend on how effectively we're able to make this a mainstream topic, not just within civil society, but within the purview of policymakers as well as the private sector that attributes similar importance to mangrove conservation as it does to melting ice caps or land degradation. And I'm happy to say that at Green Hope Foundation, across our 25 country chapters, we have planted more than 5,000 mangroves and restored over 2,400 square kilometers of mangrove ecosystems. But this is just the beginning. We have to take concerted steps towards protecting our mangrove ecosystems, beginning at the grassroots, because we do not want to doom this beautiful, fragile ecosystems. And just because we do not see mangroves right in front of us does not mean that, we aren't impacting them and their survival. We need to look into our humanity and really find that connection with our mangrove ecosystems, because saving the mangroves literally hinges on how effective we are in creating this empathy. Thank you very much.
All right, let me pop back in here. Thank you so much. It's amazing how much an experience can, change things. We were talking to Derek and Beverly just earlier, and an experience they had with a young leopard, led to the creation of the Big Cats Initiative, an amazing project supporting big cats research all over the world. And then, the experience you had out in the mangroves and seeing kind of that hidden trash, that hidden almost dump zone that just seemed to fill up again. And, kind of being the impetus for this amazing program that you've developed, getting the community involved and getting people excited about mangroves and what their value is.
Absolutely. Yes. And, it is really shocking to see that mangroves, despite being such a large ecosystem, are so left out of discussions of preserving our biodiversity or even ocean conservation. And it's really critical that people understand why mangroves are so important. And specifically, now that we're dealing with climate change and climate change induced disasters, mangroves in so many of the instances that I mentioned in my presentation form that barrier that protects the coastal communities from destruction and the destruction of their livelihoods. So it's really important that, this becomes a part of that mainstream conversation.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely. So, I think with, having been a teacher in the past and working with students through Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, I think a lot of students think they're too young to make a difference. They're too, nobody hears their voice. And, what would you say to students who, I know we have lots tuning in today because it's a Friday. What would you say to them if they had an idea or were maybe hesitating to get involved because they didn't think it was the right time or they needed to be older?
Yeah, I would say that, age has nothing to do with capability. And if you have a dream and if you have a passion, just go for it. For myself, I started my advocacy when I was 7 years old, and I saw the image of a dead bird with its belly full of plastic, and that just pushed me towards making a difference on my own because I saw others doing it. I saw my parents and grandparents giving back to the community and environment growing up, but that was what pushed me to plant my first tree on my 8th birthday, which is also World Environment Day, 5th June. So I thought I was preordained to become an eco-warrior, but honestly, I had to work really hard to ensure that other people also understood the importance of empathy and giving back. But I think as young people and as children, you have such a unique mindset that does not really see the cynicism that comes with, growing up and being an adult. And I think that unique experience is really, really needed when we're talking about addressing our world's challenges. And one thing that is really important to remember is that you don't need to start a big organization to make a difference. The most important actions start with yourself, with educating yourself, your community, your family members, and starting at the grassroots. And that's exactly what we've seen at Green Hope Foundation as well. I mean, we're a global organization, but our actions are all rooted in the local communities because that is where the change starts. And, you don't need to be 18 to make a difference. It can literally start no matter how old you are. And that is why, again, when we talk about bringing about change, intergenerational solidarity is also so important because we really need everyone's voices.
Yeah.
And, just going from there and starting no matter how old you are.
Yeah, no question. There's no age limit on when you can become a global citizen, and make more informed decisions and have a more active role. So, that's great. I'm wondering with Green Hope, what it already sounds like it's in 25 countries. What do you envision next? Where would you like to take it next?
Well, just during this pandemic, we actually were able to open 4 new chapters. My big goal is to ensure that every single person is able to follow a sustainable way of living, and not just in a tokenistic manner, but actually thinking about the planet and society with every action that they take. Now, that is my ultimate goal. My more short-term goal is to ensure that we are able to reach out to more communities, more vulnerable communities at that, and ensure that we're able to do our small bit and ensure that they have the resources and tools and skills in place. And again, we do that through education for sustainable development. What we're looking for is ensuring that we can get ESD, environmental education, into the formal education systems, and in countries that and in areas where formal education isn't an option, or they don't have access to education at all, through non-formal methods of communication, and continuing with that. We've already made progress, great progress. We are partnered with the Toronto District School Board. We are partnered with Dubai's Education Board, as I mentioned, Suriname's Youth Parliament as well. So we're making progress there and working to get this more into the curriculum and more into the mainstream.
Hey, where's the fun if you're not setting big goals, right? It's good to have lofty ambitions and to chase after them, because, I think the same with maybe kids sometimes feeling that maybe they're too young to make a difference. I think sometimes adults become a little more conservative, a little more kind of cautious as they get older, and unwilling to make some big changes or try new things. So I think that can kind of happen at both stages.
Yeah, that is true. But yeah, really intergenerational solidarity. We need the wisdom and knowledge of people of all ages and the lived experience of everyone. Otherwise, we can't bring about change.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Intergenerational. I think this generation, the older generation, should spend a little more time listening to what the younger generation has to say, because they're more switched on than ever. They're very aware of what's happening. And obviously they're thinking about their future. So I think there definitely needs to be a nice dialogue between both.
Absolutely. And, I always say that you never stop learning. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things of understanding local and indigenous knowledge, because that is exactly what they propagate as well, that you learn it through every single life experience. So no matter how old you are, you have to, just keep going and learn with every day that comes about. And also, I think that, as a young person myself, I have taken so much inspiration and wisdom from my elders and the work that they've taken forward. And there's really good and bad in every generation. So I think recognizing that, seeing the best practices, and, just working together is what is so crucial right now.
Absolutely. No question. So I think I'd like to wrap on, you watch the news, you see, there's victories and there's steps backwards. So I'm wondering, what kind of gives you hope that we can kind of turn things around, protect our biodiversity? What inspires you to keep going?
I think, my organization reflects the hope that I have, Green Hope. I would say that, I look at the positives, that what actions that we have been able to implement, and the impacts that the results that they've been able to yield. I think that really helps. And when we see that and not dwelling on the negative, I think that's really important. And I think one thing that's really important to understand, I kind of alluded to this in my presentation about wicked problems. All of these challenges that we're dealing with, they are wicked, and we have to understand that the actions, we might not see the results like right now. And I think a lot of people expect that, but we're not going to see it right now. Our future generations will reap the benefits of what we do now. And I think that is what keeps me going, that even if I do not see the result firsthand, my children and grandchildren will be able to, live in a beautiful planet that is not does not have all of these horrible things that we're going through right now. So I think that is what gives me hope. I think having that empathy instilled from a young age just keeps that hope going. And I think that is what we want to spread as well through Green Hope Foundation.
Absolutely. Well, so inspirational. It's great to follow your work. Obviously, a huge congratulations on being a young National Geographic Explorer. It's going to be exciting to see how Green Hope Foundation grows and reaches more countries. And I have a feeling with your drive and determination that you're going to see a lot of those goals reached. So keep aiming high, and thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Have a great rest of the weekend. Hopefully you can tune in a little bit more.
Absolutely. Take care.
See ya.